We're witnessing a historic moment in Cuba where protests have erupted across the nation, signalling a significant shift in the political landscape.
So the Cuban people have taken to the streets once again last Sunday in Santiago de Cuba and also in other areas near Santiago. So hundreds of people took to the streets in response to electric power outages that are controlled by the state and the regime. Also, food crisis. In Cuba, there is very little food for the amount of millions of people that are on the island. And so Cubans, since July 11th, 2021, have began practicing once again at the stage of thousands of protesters their activism. They've been engaging in rights that they don't have, but they've been demanding that they have a right to talk and to engage with each other and the public and the international community on their complaints with the current government, which is repression, which is silence, a lot of propaganda. And so the Cubans are out on the streets. Once again, it's getting hotter and hotter. It's almost, summer, and there's very little power. There's old technology that is somewhat comparable to old 1950s cars. And so you don't have an efficient electric system. And you have a electric system that's controlled by the state, that is at times weaponized by the state, just like food is weaponized by the state. So the economic conditions, I don't want your viewers to think it is something that is just happening naturally. No, this is something controlled internally by the Cuban regime. And most of the time it has to do with weaponizing both food and electricity so the people won't demand their human rights.
Yeah, protests aren't that well known in Cuba. I mean, they all sort of supported the revolution and didn't really protest and really weren't allowed to. I think the fact is that you are seeing open protests shows a bit like fall of the Soviet Union, that people prepared to go out in the streets means pretty dire. And also everyone's trying to get out. So, there was a view that if you left the revolution and you escaped, you were sort of a traitor. But now everyone's saying, well, if you can go, I would as well. So it's been the biggest exodus of Cubans trying to flee in some time. Cuba's in its worst state economically for 30 years. It's a bit of a combination. I think it's COVID, it's internal mismanagement, some decisions they've made internally sort of post the Castro brothers, and the sanctions. Obama, when he was president, was sort of trying to lift the sanctions and get Cuba more integrated with the Caribbean and the US and North America. And then Trump, sort of reimposed them on sort of terrorist grounds, and Biden hasn't lifted them. So the sort of, the smashing of Cuban tourism by COVID and the sanctions, and also just being too centrally planned in a 21st century economy, it's been like a terrible sort of confluence of three things coming together.